Hello and welcome to Blueprint Journeys. Today we're going to explore the stories of 3 remarkable buildings in New York that were torn down and find out what took their place. First, let's travel back in time to discover these fascinating tales of change and transformation in the heart of the city. The iconic Penn Station. Let's begin our journey with the original Penn Station in New York. As we take a closer look, we can spot some distinctive features right away. The grand entrance along 7th Avenue catches our eye. There are entrances for cars on the north and south sides, allowing them to drive in, and a central entrance for pedestrians. The central entrance is supported by 6 Doric columns, a style inspired by the simplest of the Greek architectural orders. These columns hold up a flat entablature with a medallion on top. All the columns on the building follow this Doric style, which was based on the design of Bernini's Piazza in Rome. This magnificent structure was constructed in the Beaux-Arts style. This style draws inspiration from the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, a renowned school of architecture at the time. Beaux-Arts architecture often looks back to historical influences, particularly the classical styles of Greece and Rome. If we take a closer look at the Great Waiting Room, we'll notice its design is inspired by the baths of Caracalla in ancient Rome. This portion of the building rises above the rest and is a testament to both architectural and engineering prowess. The original Penn Station was completed in 1910 by the esteemed architectural firm of McKim, Mead, and Amp White. This firm was known for its exceptional work during the Gilded Age, with other notable creations like the Washington Square Arch, the library at Columbia University, and the library at what is now Bronx Community College. Penn Station was not just an architectural marvel, but also an engineering feat. It involved the construction of tunnels under the Hudson River, which didn't exist before. Prior to this station, travelers had to stop in Jersey City and then take a ferry across the Hudson River to reach Manhattan. With the completion of this station, passengers entered a breathtaking and ornate space that left a lasting impression. Now let's step inside the original Penn Station to explore its magnificent interiors. We're going to examine 2 different parts of the station: the waiting room on the left and the train shed on the right. In the waiting room, what immediately catches our attention is the vaulted coffered ceiling. It's a series of recessed, decorative panels in the ceiling. In the train shed, we see a similar design, but here it's made of steel instead of stone. Instead of the coffered panels, there are small panes of glass in the ceiling to allow natural light in. Both spaces feature these impressive groin vaults, which are arched ceilings intersecting at right angles. If we look directly into the waiting room, we can't miss the grand entrances from 7th and 8th Avenues. There are also large staircases leading to 33rd and 31st Streets, flanked by huge clear-story windows that flood the space with light. The coffered ceiling in this area is made of travertine, a type of stone quarried in Tivoli, Italy, which is the same stone used to build the ancient Roman Colosseum. But what's truly striking is the incredible scale of this room. Just take a look at the size of a person standing there. It's a vast, soaring space. And when it was built, it was considered one of the greatest spaces not only in New York, but in the entire world. As travelers ascended from the train into the station, their first view was the breathtaking skylit train shed, influenced by the grand train sheds of Europe. However, the shapes and forms in this steel structure still echoed what we see in the stone-encased central waiting room. The remarkable thing about all this steel is that it represented the most advanced construction of its time in 1910. All the columns, beams, and arches were assembled from smaller pieces that were riveted together, forming an intricate framework. Here's an interesting fact. The beautiful stone waiting room is actually a bit of a deception. It's not the stone that supports the room. It's the hidden steel structure that holds it up. This same steel structure supports the great train shed at the rear, along 8th Avenue. What's also noteworthy is that this building wasn't constructed by the government or the city. It was the work of a private company. They owned both the land and the building, and this ownership played a significant role in its eventual fate. Sadly, the original Penn Station only stood for 50 years. The decline of the railroads left the Pennsylvania Railroad Company facing financial difficulties, and they had to sell the building to a developer to stay afloat. As a result, this incredible architectural masterpiece was demolished. It's a tragic loss because despite its decline, the station remained one of New York City's greatest buildings. This event marked a turning point, leading to the formation of the Landmarks movement and the creation of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Today, such an iconic building would likely be protected from demolition. Grand Central Station, just a few blocks north, was spared a similar fate. In 1963, the original Penn Station was torn down. In its place now stands the modern Madison Square Garden, which is actually the 4th incarnation of this famous sports and entertainment venue. Madison Square Garden. Now let's explore the second version of Madison Square Garden, which is arguably the most iconic. The original Madison Square Garden was constructed in the 1870s. The one we're going to delve into now was built in the 1890s. This particular edition was designed by Stanford White, a partner in the architectural firm of McKim, Mead, and Ampwhite. Notably, Stanford White not only designed this building but also lived there and tragically met his end there. In the image on the right, we're looking at the building from Madison Square, gazing to the northeast. In the image on the left, we have Park Avenue right in front, with Madison Avenue in the distance along 26th Street. What stands out immediately is the architectural style, Renaissance Revival. The building is crafted from a type of buff brick that Stanford White favored. You'll notice a beautiful arcade, allowing people to seek shelter from the weather while buying tickets. Above the arcade, there's a loggia, which is another kind of arcade. While the bottom arcade features stunning Renaissance arches, the top one consists of columns supporting a flat entablature with a balustrade above it. At the corners, there are turrets, dome-like structures, both at the corners and mid-block, flanking the main entrance. On the image to the left, you can spot plenty of terracotta ornamentation, outlining the blind windows on the corner turrets. The image on the left gives you a sense of the building's scale, stretching from Park Avenue in the foreground, with its trolley tracks, all the way to Madison Avenue in the distance. It occupies an entire city block, making it a substantial structure. The main arena within hosted a wide array of events, from presidential conventions to circus acts, boxing matches, and even a velodrome for bicycle racing. What made it even more remarkable for its time was the sliding skylight, a true amenity of the 1890s. One of the most prominent features of this Madison Square Garden was its Grand Tower, inspired by the Giralda Campanile at the cathedral in Seville, Spain. The entire building was a reflection of Stanford White's fascination with Spanish architecture. He included the tower as a distinctive feature, meant to serve as a beacon on the city's skyline. He also aimed to compete with Joseph Pulitzer's New York World newspaper building at Park Row, to be the tallest in the city. To achieve this, he added a statue of the huntress Diana. It's intriguing that he chose to place a nude statue atop the tower, symbolizing pleasure and entertainment, in contrast to the cathedral's religious significance in Spain. Interestingly, the investors were initially hesitant about building this tower, and Stanford White had to fight for its inclusion. After it was built, they struggled to find a purpose for it. To generate income, they rented out apartments in the tower. Stanford White himself rented one of these apartments and used it when his family was away. Tragically, it was also in this tower where he lived and met his untimely end. On the roof, concealed behind an arcade, was the actual garden, an open-air restaurant and cafe with entertainment shows. It was here that he was fatally shot by the husband of a woman with whom he was having an affair in 1906. The second Madison Square Garden faced financial difficulties and was eventually torn down in the 1920s. It was replaced by the New York Life Insurance Building, which still stands to this day. New York Herald Building. Now let's turn our attention to another building in New York City, the New York Herald Building, which aimed to compete with Joseph Pulitzer's New York World Building. Designed by none other than Stanford White, it had some notable features. To get a sense of the building's location, look at the elevated train line running along 6th Avenue on the east side and Broadway on the west side with its trolley cars. On the main entrance facade, you'll find a recessed entrance beneath a somewhat semicircular arcade. Above this entrance, there's a dual-arched window, and further above, you'll see the bell ringers, who were actually printing press workers, and a statue of Minerva, the Roman goddess of wisdom. What's striking is the intricate terracotta decoration between the windows. The building's roof is unique with a hip roof and a flat area in the middle. This design was necessary because the site had a trapezoidal shape. The arcade itself rests on a small platform known as a stylobate, a feature often seen in Greek temples. Furthermore, Stanford White included a plaza in front of the building, which still exists and is known as Herald Square. The New York Herald was founded by James Gordon Bennett and later passed on to his son, James Gordon Bennett Jr. The younger Bennett foresaw the northward shift of New York's future. Before this, all the city's newspapers were concentrated at Park Row, next to City Hall in downtown. He decided to move the New York Herald to the intersection of Broadway and 6th Avenue, right at the crossroads of 36th Street, which we now know as Herald Square. James Gordon Bennett Jr. was acquainted with Stanford White from their time in Newport, Rhode Island, where the affluent socialized at the turn of the century. White had even designed the interiors for Bennett's yacht, a project he admired. So he turned to White for the design of the newspaper's new headquarters. This building wasn't just inspired by, but essentially a direct replica of the Loggia del Concilio in Verona, a Venetian Renaissance palace constructed in 1476. This palace itself drew inspiration from the founding hospital by Brunelleschi in Florence in the 1420s. In the Loggia del Concilio, statues were placed above each pilaster, and White substituted these with owls at Bennett's request. These owls had electric green light bulbs inside their eyes, making them glow at night. Regrettably, by 1930, the entire building had been demolished. However, some remnants can still be found in Herald Square, including the statue of Minerva, the bell ringers, and a few owls. Unlike the previous buildings we discussed, which were replaced by iconic structures, the New York Herald building was succeeded by a rather ordinary office building. At its base, you'll now find a bank and a drugstore. We've now explored three remarkable McKim, Mead, and Amp White buildings that no longer grace the city's skyline. It's worth noting that in the early 20th century, the prevailing attitude in New York was one of progress and change. Old buildings were often torn down to make way for new ones. However, in hindsight, it's clear that preserving some of these historic structures would have enriched the city's heritage. As the New York Times noted after the demolition of Penn Station in the 1960s, ultimately we are judged not by the monuments we create, but by those we have destroyed. If you have any other demolished iconic buildings you'd like us to discuss, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching the video, and if you found it informative, please like and subscribe to Blueprint Journeys for similar content. We look forward to sharing more knowledge with you in the future. Until then, take care.